Hi dear students, greetings to all of you. So today we are going to discuss something about biotransformation. Let us see. So here we are going to cover the topic under the following subheadings, that is xenobiotics and biotransformation. Why is biotransformation necessary? Sites of biotransformation, first pass metabolism, consequences of biotransformation, and drug metabolizing enzymes which include microsomal and non-microsomal enzymes as well. And then types of biotransformation reactions, enzyme induction and inhibition as well, and the factors affecting drug metabolism. So before going into the topic, I would like to tell you someone has asked me which book we have to read between the two basic books that I have given the reference in my last session. It is Satoskar and Sharma. I would like to tell you one thing. Certain topics are good in Satoskar and certain topics are good in Sharma. So you have to read both the books for pharmacology. And apart from that, regarding my topics, I'll be collecting the information from 7 standard textbooks for the general topics. And for the therapeutics topics, I'll be covering around 10 to 12 books. So you don't need to go anywhere for the topics which I discuss or I teach. Okay, so you can just go through the PPT. And in some areas, I have given the text also so that you'll be able to write in your examinations also. But I'll be giving the explanation part from my side. Okay. And then regarding my topics, I'll be telling which book you have to refer properly. So for this biotransformation book, majority of the topic is discovered nicely in Sharma book. Okay, you can go through that book. And apart from that, the matter or information that I have collected from the various sources that I have kept in my topic, so you can go through that also. So let us get into the topic, xenobiotics. Xenobiotics means the substances which are foreign to the body. Greek word xenos means foreign and bios means life. So that means any foreign substance that enters into the body is known as xenobiotic. For example, it can be plant products, alkaloids, drugs, or chemicals, or pesticides, or even poisons also. So xenobiotics, when they enter into the body, either through ingestion or through inhalation or through absorption through skin. So they are mainly entering into the body unintentionally without our knowledge through food and drink, or deliberately as drugs for therapeutic or even recreation purpose also. So apart from that, exposure to environmental xenobiotics also happens. So all these xenobiotics entry into the body can be like inadvertent or accidental or inescapable. So they may produce innocuous or they may be innocuous or they may provoke biologic response because of the release of the active metabolite from the compound that has entered into the body. So what will happen? So xenobiotic has entered through various sources into the body. So what will happen to that particular xenobiotic? So here we will connect the xenobiotic to the process of biotransformation. The action of a drug may not continue indefinitely, isn't it? If you give a paracetamol to a patient, it is not that the paracetamol will stay forever in his body throughout his life. So it is going to get eliminated after some period of time. Because because it is getting eliminated, the action also gets terminated after some period of time. So mechanisms like biotransformation, excretion, and tissue redistribution, they all terminate the actions of a drug. So the paracetamol action is getting halted. So the reason for this is one is biotransformation. It is going to get transformed within the body, and after getting transformed, it is going to get excreted. And apart from this, there will be a process called tissue redistribution that also helps in termination of the actions of a particular drug or even the xenobiotic. So whatever endogenous molecule in the form of xenobiotic, whenever it enters into the body, after a certain period of time, the actions have to be terminated either through the process of biotransformation or tissue redistribution. So, what is biotransformation? The definition is you can't write the definition from anywhere. So, you have to properly write the definition from the standard textbooks only in the examinations. So, it is enzyme catalyzed biochemical transformation of drugs within the living organisms. So biochemical transformation, that is biotransformation, within the living organism, that is bio, and enzymes are involved in it. That is the complete definition. So what happens regarding biotransformation? Let us see. The non-polar or lipid soluble compounds, the xenobiotics they enter, so which will be existing in the form of non-polar or lipid soluble compounds. So these lipid soluble molecules which are non-polar, they can get easily absorbed at various sites of absorption. So if we want to terminate the actions of that particular molecule, we have to make it polar or lipid insoluble or hydrophilic molecule, so that there will not be any reabsorption in the renal tubules. And the molecule will get excreted as such outside. So in the absence of such sort of metabolism, body will not be able to get rid of lipophilic substances and they will become very long acting. Example, barbiturates. So in case of barbiturate poisoning, we'll be dealing with some other mechanisms through which we can eliminate the excess amount of barbiturate molecule out of the body. Okay. Then most hydrophilic drugs are little biotransformed and are largely excreted unchanged. So the xenobiotic could be either lipophilic or even hydrophilic. If it is lipophilic, it has to get converted to hydrophilic and then only it can get excreted outside. If it is hydrophilic molecule, so there is much biotransformation is not needed. So the molecule can get excreted unchanged outside. So the examples are streptomycin, neostigmine, pancuronium, etc. So this is the whole biotransformation mechanism of xenobiotics. So here you can see lipophilic, highly lipophilic molecules, they get accumulated and stored in the body tissues. Then these molecules, they may undergo phase 1 metabolism. So through phase 1 metabolism, the molecules may get converted into either active molecule or inactive molecules. Then they get converted into polar molecules or hydrophilic molecules. So if the active molecules are liberated through phase 1 metabolism, then they have to again go through phase 2 metabolism to release inactive molecules or inactive metabolites. So they will be hydrophilic and they'll get excreted. And the hydrophilic molecules as such, they will get excreted through renal system or biliary system. They don't need to go through phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism. So the pesticides or metabolites, so they will go through glutathione S transferase conjugation and then leucoronal sulfate transferase conjugation and N-acetyl transferase enzyme conjugation and sulfotransferase enzyme conjugation. So hydrophilic metabolites are liberated, which can get excreted through urine. So this is the whole summary of biotransformation. So the drug molecule is entering, it will directly go through conjugate, it will directly enter into the phase 2 metabolic reactions. So where a conjugate molecule is liberated, which can get excreted. So because this molecule will be polar in nature. Okay. So then sometimes the drug molecule will enter into phase 1 first, then it will result in a drug metabolite with modified activity and sometimes with inactive drug metabolite. Both of them undergo through the process of phase 2 reactions. So where conjugation reactions happen and then they will liberate inactive metabolites which will get excreted. So the main principle here is ultimately the lipophilic molecule has to be converted to hydrophilic molecule so that it will get excreted. So because of which the termination of the action of that particular molecule will result in the body. So the toxic manifestations will not result in the body of the patient. So this is biotransformation. Why biotransformation is necessary? Let us see. To easily eliminate the drug, to terminate drug action by inactivating it, and by changing the physicochemical properties from active or inactive to inactive or active molecules, and lipophilic state to hydrophilic state, unionized state to ionized state, non-polar to polar state, or plasma protein bound state to free state, so that these molecules can get eliminated out of the body. And the main purpose of this biotransformation is to terminate the drug action by inactivating it. Okay. Then coming to the sites of biotransformation. So the major site of biotransformation is liver, and apart from that, we can see the biotransformation happening in kidney, GIT, lungs, skin, and even brain as well. So in GIT, most commonly, one example you may remember. So penicillin G is metabolized by gastric acid, and in intestines, the drugs which undergo metabolism are chloramphenicol, chlorpromazine, clonazepam, cyclosporin, etc. And proteolytic enzymes metabolize insulin molecule, and enzymes in the walls of intestines metabolize catecholamines. And in the plasma, succinylcholine drug molecule is inactivated by pseudocholinesterase enzyme that is present in the plasma. And certain compounds which are highly polar and water soluble drugs which are not metabolized and get excreted as this, the main compound you can remember is aminoglycosides. Then we'll discuss something about the first pass metabolism. What is first pass metabolism? After oral administration, many drugs like isoproterenol, meperidine, pentagocin, morphine, etc., they are absorbed intact from the small intestine and transported via the portal system to the liver, where they undergo extensive metabolism. This is known as first pass effect or first pass metabolism. That is the metabolism which is happening first time in the body, or pre-systemic metabolism, because the metabolism is happening before their entry into the systemic circulation. Okay, so you may get any short note like first pass effect, you have to write the same first pass metabolism, or pre-systemic metabolism also, you have to write the same thing. So you should know the various synonyms also. So let us see. So what is the net result that we are going to get here? So because of the first pass metabolism, decreased bioavailability can be there, because the drug is metabolized and getting converted into various other metabolites. And then because of the decreased bioavailability, there will be decreased therapeutic response. So because of which, so when a drug is administered through orally, so there is first pass metabolism resulting in decreased bioavailability and decreased therapeutic response. So for certain drugs, we prefer parenteral route of administration. Example is sublingual administration of isosorbate dinitrate in angina. So here in this case, because this molecule has a tendency to go through first pass metabolism, so we don't prefer, because angina is an emergency condition, and because if the molecule undergoes pre-systemic metabolism, then there is little bit amount, that is less bioavailability of the drug. So to avoid that, we chose parenteral route of administration, that is in this molecule preferably sublingual route of administration. So you can see in this diagram here, oral administration. Dots means this is drug molecule entering, traversing through the stomach and entering to the small intestines. Absorption will be there. And then it will enter through portal system. It will enter into the liver, where pre-systemic metabolism or first pass metabolism happens. And then it enters, from there, it enters into the systemic circulation. So same thing, stomach, small intestine absorption, absorption into the hepatic portal circulation, entering into the liver, first pass metabolism. So here the drug conjugates are formed, which we'll be discussing in the subsequent slides. Then it enters into the systemic circulation. So you can see here the disadvantage with the first pass metabolism. 100% of the dose is administered orally. It traverses the stomach, 100% here also. By the time it gets absorbed in the small intestine and gets metabolized there, only 70% of the dose will be remaining. And then here the 70% enters through the portal system into the liver, where again goes through phase 1 and phase 2 reactions, and metabolites or conjugates are formed. By the time it reaches into the systemic circulation, only 15% of the dose will be available. So the bioavailability is getting decreased. So that is the disadvantage with first pass metabolism in one way. So then the drugs which undergo first pass effect. This is most common asked question in your Viva VC. So we have seen several sites, that is liver, intestinal mucosa, and bronchial mucosa. So the drugs which undergo first pass metabolism in liver are isosorbate dinitrate, glyceryl trinitrate, morphine, pithidine, xalocaine, imipramide, amitriptyline, and propranolol. The drugs which undergo first pass metabolism in intestinal mucosa are levodopa, alpha-methyl dopa, testosterone, progesterone, chlorpromazine, clonazepam, midazolam, cyclosporine, etc. And the drugs which undergo first-pass metabolism in the bronchial mucosa are nicotine, isoprenaline, etc. Then, limited pre-systemic metabolism can also occur in skin and lungs as well. Okay. So, if a drug after oral administration furnishes metabolites which are active, the significance of first pass decreases. So, active means the pharmacological actions or therapeutic response still is present within the body. So, that is like significance of first pass metabolism. It has first pass metabolism has advantages and disadvantages also. If xenobiotics, which are not good to the body, it is when it is not like a drug molecule which is used for therapeutic purpose, then it is like when poisonous compounds enter the body, then we have to increase the first pass metabolism or eliminate the molecule outside as such. So here, if active metabolites are released after they undergo through the first pass metabolism in the liver, that is not advantageous to the person. Then in liver disease, it acquires greater significance as the oral bioavailability of the drug goes much higher. What happens in liver disease? The enzyme system functioning capacity of the enzyme system in liver disease goes down. So because of which metabolism will not happen up to the 100% extent. So the bioavailability of the drug may be higher. So the first pass metabolism is an important determinant of oral bioavailability. So then attributes of drugs with high first pass metabolism. Oral dose is higher than parenteral dose because we have seen only 15% of the drug molecule which we have administered through oral route is going entering into the systemic circulation. So oral dose has to be increased. Then there is marked individual variation in the oral dose due to differences in the extent of first pass metabolism. It varies from person to person. That we'll see what are the reasons for variation. Then oral bioavailability is increased in patients with liver disease. This point we have already discussed. Then oral bioavailability of a drug is increased if another drug competing with it in first pass metabolism is given concurrently. Example, propranolol and chlorpromazine. Then drugs with high first pass metabolism. This is the most common question that is to be asked in biology. Please remember it. So I have given a mnemonic like nitrates have large pre-systemic metabolism. Just take the first letters of that. N for nitrates. Have means H for hydrocortisone, L for lignocaine, P for propranolol, S for salbutamol, and M for morphine. These are the drugs which have high first pass metabolism. Then we'll discuss something about consequences of biotransformation. So when a molecule undergoes biotransformation, it can give rise to active metabolite or inactive metabolite. Let us see. So active drug molecule giving rise to equally active metabolite. Examples are phenacetin giving rise to paracetamol, which is equally active metabolite. Diazepam to oxazepam, which is this is oxazepam is the active metabolite of diazepam molecule. Then codeine, morphine, and morphine to morphine 6-glucuronide, digitoxin to digoxin, amitriptyline to nortriptyline, and imipramine to desimipramine. Then there is a possibility of conversion of active drug molecule to inactive metabolite also. Example is phenobarbital to hydroxyphenobarbital. Then another possibility is inactive or pro-drug molecule getting converted to active metabolite. So pro-drugs are developed with the aim of achieving significant concentration at desired site and also minimizing the side effects. We'll see the subsequent slides, the advantages and disadvantages, everything. So it is one of the drug delivery systems. So we can see the prodrug and its active metabolite, levodopa, dopamine, enalapril, enalaprilat, alpha-methyl dopa, alpha-methyl norepinephrine, and dipivefrin, epinephrine, and proguanil, cycloguanil, prednisone to prednisolone, acyclovir, acyclovir triphosphate, campicillin, ampicillin, and sulfasalicin, 5-aminosalicylic acid, cyclophosphamide getting converted into aldophosphamide, phosphoramide mustard, and acrolein. So these are the various active metabolites which result from the Prodrug, cyclophosphamide. You did not remember all the drugs examples. Just try to remember at least 2 to 3 examples to write in the final exam. So advantages of these prodrugs. Number one is drug reaches the maximum concentration at the desired site of action. Suppose, for example, if you administer dopamine to a patient, it will not cross blood-brain barrier. But if you give prodrug of dopamine, that is levodopa, that molecule crosses blood-brain barrier. So in case of Parkinson's disease, where the action of levodopa is needed within the central nervous system, so you can use the prodrug molecule, that levodopa. It will cross the blood-brain barrier and gets converted into its active metabolite dopamine, and then it will produce its own actions within the central nervous system. Then number two, to provide site-specific drug delivery. That is, example, methenamine is converted to formaldehyde in urine at acidic pH to produce local effect. So methenamine is the prodrug which is going to get converted to formaldehyde at acidic pH. Then to prolong the duration of action, example, antipsychotic fluphenazine, and side effects are also reduced. For example, chloramphenicol palmitate. So this kind of drug formulation, if you administer in pediatric patients, there is a reduced bitter taste for the children. So this is another advantage. Then disadvantages. They cannot be used for emergency situations as onset of action is delayed because it has to get converted into its active metabolite, then only it can produce its pharmacological action. So emergency situations, it is not preferred. They cannot be activated to achieve desired therapeutic concentration in liver disease as they are mainly activated in liver. So liver functioning capacity is deranged in the liver disease. So active metabolite is not easily formed. So the action is not immediately expected. So here you can see one example of a clinical case. Codeine linked to breastfeeding danger. Warnings and class action suit follow. Toronto neonates poisoning death. We'll just see the first paragraph. Second paragraph is not important. So a class action suit over the death of an apparently healthy Toronto newborn who died last year from opiate toxicity from breast milk has renewed the debate over prescribing Tylenol 3 to breastfeeding mothers. After the baby's death, doctors at Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children issued a warning that codeine given for postnatal pain can produce deadly concentrations of morphine in breast milk. So here, codeine molecule is getting converted into morphine, active metabolite. So which is very sometimes lethal to the baby, and the baby even may die. So because of the respiratory depression that the morphine molecule is producing in the neonates, because that molecule is crossing through the placental barrier, and then it is secreted into the milk, and then the respiratory depressant effects are seen in the neonate. So similarly, so we have to be very careful whenever we administer this prodrugs getting converted into active metabolites or active molecules getting converted into active metabolites. Okay. Then drug metabolizing enzyme. So how this biotransformation happens, what are the various enzymes that we can see here, let us see. So we have several types of metabolizing enzymes. That is, one is microsomal and another one is non-microsomal. And apart from this, non-enzymatic biotransformation also happens, which is otherwise known as half-man elimination. So we'll see sites and enzymes used in biotransformation. It is usually liver, that is like we can see hepatic microsomal enzymes and extrahepatic microsomal enzymes and hepatic non-microsomal enzymes like acetylation, sulfation, and alcohol or aldehyde dehydrogenase, hydrolysis, etc. All these reactions are involved through that pathway. So we'll see. Although drug biotransformation in vivo can occur by spontaneous, non-catalyzed chemical reactions, most transformations are catalyzed by specific cellular enzymes. And majority of biotransformation reactions occur by specific cellular enzymes located in endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, cytosol, lysosomes, or nuclear envelope, or even plasma membrane. And these metabolic transformation by enzymes may be microsomal or cytosolic or even mitochondria. We'll see the types of reactions in subsequent slides. So hepatic microsomal enzymes, sites of hepatic microsomal enzymes are primarily in the microsomes of smooth membrane of endoplasmic reticulum of the hepatic cells. That is, primary site is liver, and specifically smooth membrane of endoplasmic reticulum of hepatic cells. And apart from that, it also happens in intestinal mucosa, lungs, and then kidneys. So smooth membrane of the endoplasmic reticulum is involved in the microsomal enzymes, related to the microsomal enzymes involved in the biotransformation. Whereas rough surface endoplasmic reticulum contains ribosomes which are involved in protein synthesis. Then microsomal enzymes are non-specific in action, can be induced or activated, and can metabolize only lipid-soluble drugs. So that's what we need. Lipid-soluble has to be converted to hydrophilic molecule and then it has to get excreted. And the microsomal enzymes are concerned primarily with phase 1 reactions, which include oxidation, reduction, and hydrolytic reactions, and phase 2 reactions, which include primarily glucuronide conjugation reactions. Apart from the various other reactions are also there. Microsomal enzymes are inducible by drugs, certain dietary constituents, and other agencies. Just try to remember these salient features, and we'll get into the details of this enzyme-related biotransformation subsequently. Among these microsomal enzymes, we have several types, that is like superfamily of enzymes, that is cytochrome P450, CYP enzymes, otherwise known as, then flavin containing monooxygenases, otherwise known as FMO, and epoxide hydroxylases, which are referred to EH. Some phase 2 enzymes like esterases, amidases, and glucuronide transferases, they also belong to hepatic microsomal enzymes category. These microsomal enzyme systems are accessible only to substances with high oil or water partition coefficient. That's what we have just now discussed. Lipid soluble drugs only will be acting upon through this pathway. Mainly, these enzymes alter drugs to make them more polar and water soluble so that they can be excreted by the kidneys. This point we have already discussed. And CYP enzymes are involved in, that is cytochrome P450 enzymes. They are involved in metabolism of many dietary and xenobiotic compounds, and also synthesis of endogenous substances like steroids, bile acids from cholesterol. So one is metabolism, like xenobiotics or dietary compounds, like charcoal broiled meat and cruciferous vegetables, which produce like some metabolites which are not healthy to the body, they can get excreted outside. Then, apart from that, synthesis of endogenous molecules like steroids, bile acids are also formed because of this hepatic microsomal enzymes. So let us see one by one. Cytochrome P450. Why it is known as cytochrome P450? It is so named because in its reduced form, it is a hemoprotein. Cytochrome P means it is a hemoprotein. So it is in its reduced form, it can combine with carbon monoxide, giving a product which absorbs light maximally at 450 nanometers. That's why it is referred to as cytochrome P450. Maximum light absorption occurs at that particular wavelength. A drug bound to cytochrome P450 may be either oxidized or reduced. So there are around 200 isozymes of the enzyme cytochrome P450 in human liver cells. Based on the studies of immunoblotting analysis, functional markers, and selective P450 inhibitors. This is a very, very important point for postgraduate students. Please make a note of it. Then isoform of enzyme, otherwise known as isozyme, means one enzyme of the group that catalyzes the same reaction, but it has different protein. Okay, so each such isozyme is encoded by separate gene, and we have 50 such functionally active genes. So variations in their gene structure. So that happens from that varies from patient to patient, person to person. So variations in their gene structure of this isoform, cytochrome P450 isoform, explains the differences in the drug metabolism among different individuals and ethnic groups. If you give a same molecule to two people having genetic variation of this gene structure, then the metabolism varies and drug effect, everything varies between the both the patients. So what is this? Among the cytochrome P450 family, we usually come across cytochrome P3A4. So what is this 3A4? 3 denotes the family of that particular enzyme group, and A denotes subfamily, and 4 means chromosome which encodes that particular gene. So we have 3 families, cytochrome P1, 2, 3, and we have several subfamilies like A, B, C, D, E, etc. And the genes number varies 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. like that. So chromosome encoding gene is this number. Okay. So this is the nomenclature of cytochrome P 3A4, or in case any other cytochrome P variations also. Cytochrome P3A4 is responsible for the metabolism of over 50% of the prescription drugs. That's why we have discussed just now about it. Metabolized by the liver, followed by CYP2D6. Other important isozymes are 2C9, 2C19, 1A2. So in humans, 12 cytochrome P's form from 3 families. So that is family 1, 2, 3. That's what we discussed in the earlier slide. They are responsible for drug metabolism, and other important varieties are 3A, 2C, and 2D. So you don't need to remember all the variants of cytochrome P families, subfamilies, and the genes, variations, and all this. It's beyond your capacity. Only thing, the main drug molecules which undergo through which microsomal enzyme, whether it is hepatic microsomal enzyme or non-microsomal enzyme. So that much you can remember. So cytochrome P450 we have finished. Then comes FMOS, that is flavin monooxygenases. So they are minor contributors to drug metabolism. Example is H2 receptor antagonist, clozapine, etopride, etc. The metabolites are benign and cause no drug-to-drug interaction. And then epoxide hydrolase deactivates potentially toxic metabolites produced by cytochrome P450. So again, they will undergo through epoxide hydroxylase pathway. So example is carbamazepine 1011 epoxide, which is an active toxic metabolite of the carbamazepine. It is again inactivated by microsomal epoxide hydroxylase enzyme subsequently. Then we have discussed till now about the microsomal enzymes, that is like cytochrome P450s and FMNs and EH. The non-microsomal enzymes are also present through which the biotransformation reactions happen. Let us see. Sites of non-microsomal enzymes, where are they present? Cytosol, mitochondria of hepatic cells and other tissues, placenta, and even by those present in the intestinal microorganisms like microfloral enzymes, and also in plasma. So the examples of these enzymes are MAO, that is monoamino oxidase enzyme, and then alcohol dehydrogenase enzyme, xanthine oxidase enzyme, esterases, amidases, transferases, conjugases, etc. Then reactions catalyzed by them are phase 1 reactions, all like oxidation, reduction, hydrolytic reactions, and phase 2 reactions except glucuronide conjugation. Whereas in through microsomal enzymes, they catalyze phase 1 reactions like oxidation, reduction, and hydrolysis, and glucuronide conjugation reactions are phase 2. So this is the difference. And these are non-inducible but can be inhibited and usually show genetic variation. Example, pseudocholinesterase and acetyltransferase. You just remember the name. So the discussion in detail will be discussed in when we go to the autonomic nervous system. Both microsomal and non-microsomal enzymes are deficient in the newborn. So this is well-known factor. In the newborn, there is a deficient functioning capacity of the microsomal enzyme and then quantity also, especially premature newborns, making them more susceptible to many drugs, for example, chloramphenicol and opioids. So when you give this chloramphenicol in newborn people, there is a lethal toxicity of chloramphenicol induced gray baby syndrome. So because the metabolizing capacity in the newborn is very less when compared to the adults. So this deficit is made up in the first few months more quickly in the case of oxidation and other phase 1 reactions than in the case of glucuronide and other conjugations which take 3 or more months to reach adult level. So first 1 month, first few months, so you can get the metabolizing enzymes which are involved ready for or involved for phase 1 reactions, but to get the metabolizing enzymes functioning capacity in full, The baby has to be like after birth, again, it has to be like at least minimum 3 months age. Okay. Then what is the specific differences between microsomal enzymes and non-microsomal enzymes? Let us see in a nutshell. So they are present in smooth endoplasmic reticulum of cells of liver, GIT, kidney, lungs, and skin. And here the cytosol, mitochondria, and plasma, non-microsomal enzymes, specifically and mainly. And it is non-specific and inducible, whereas non-microsomal, non-inducible. They undergo, both of them undergo phase 1 reactions, and here mostly oxidation, here mostly hydrolysis. And microsomal enzymes, they are involved in only glucuronide conjugation, whereas non-microsomal, all conjugation reactions except glucuronide conjugation. And examples for microsomal enzymes are CYP450, FMOS, and EH, and glucuronil transferases, etc. Here, MAVO, esterases, amidases, transferases, conjugases, all these enzymes, etc. So now you can see the main difference, the reactions that they undergo microsomal enzymes, phase 1 reactions plus glucuronide conjugation. Here phase 1 reactions plus all reactions in phase 2 except glucuronide conjugation. The same thing here. So phase 1 reactions and phase 2 reactions. So phase 1 reactions can get linked to both microsomal as well as non-microsomal. Here also the same. Phase 2 also we need both microsomal and non-microsomal, but there is a demarcation. So phase 1 reactions, all reactions, microsomal as well as non-microsomal enzymes are involved. Whereas in phase 2 reactions, glucuronide conjugation, it specifically happens through microsomal enzyme system, and all the other conjugation type of reactions happen through non-microsomal reactions. This is the main difference. Don't get confused. Then what is Hoffman elimination? That is like we have discussed microsomal enzymes, non-microsomal enzymes, which are both helpful in the metabolic biotransformation of xenobiotics. Then there is a possibility of non-enzymatic biotransformation also, which is otherwise referred to as Hoffman elimination. So it is inactivation of the drug in the plasma spontaneously through molecular arrangement without the involvement of any enzyme. So by default, it itself through molecular arrangement, molecular rearrangement, it gets transformed, or it gets transformed into inactive molecule and gets excreted. Example is skeletal muscle relaxant atracurium, and another molecule is anti-cancer drug like meclorethrin, which is a prodrug, changes spontaneously into active ethylene cations at the slightly alkaline pH of plasma. Okay. Then now we will go through, after understanding various types of microsomal and non-microsomal enzymes, we'll get into the reactions, biotransformation reactions proper. What happens when a xenobiotic enters into the body? So we have two types, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is otherwise known as non-synthetic. This is synthetic. This is functionalization reaction. This is conjugation reaction. So phase 1 includes oxidation, reduction, and hydrolysis. Phase 2 includes conjugation of endogenous molecule with the drug. So that can be glucuronide conjugate, sulfate conjugate, amino acid conjugate, glutathione conjugate, and glycine conjugate, acetylation or methylation, anything can happen. Okay, these are the various main reactions that get involved in phase 1 and phase 2 reactions. So what is the purpose of phase 1? Through all these reactions, it makes the molecule more susceptible to phase 2 reaction. So what happens? The drug molecule or any other xenobiotic, in fact, so it will go through the process of phase 1 reactions and can get converted to active or inactive molecule. If it is active, it has to go through again phase 2 reactions and can get converted to inactive molecule and can get excreted. If it is inactive molecule, directly it may can get excreted after going through phase 1 reactions. So phase 2 reactions makes the molecule more polar, ideal substrates for active transport and excretion. So directly some molecules, they directly go through phase 2 without getting involved in phase 1 reactions, and then get involved and then get transformed to inactive metabolites and get excreted as such. These are the exceptions that we'll see. So xenobiotic, oxidation, reduction, and hydrolysis of phase 1, then metabolite is formed. So Again, going through conjugation, conjugated metabolite excreted through urine. So, non-synthetic phase 1 or functionalization reactions, oxidation, reduction, hydrolysis. So, what happens here? A functional group like OH, COOH, CHO, NH2, SH, all these functional groups is either generated or uncovered or exposed so that a metabolite of the xenobiotic compound is formed, which can be either active or inactive. Then phase 2, synthetic or conjugation reactions. An endogenous radical is conjugated to the drug metabolite. Xenobiotic gets combined with the endogenous radical, giving rise to conjugated metabolite, which is mostly inactive so that it will be eliminated out of the body through excretion. Exception is glucuronate conjugate of morphine and sulfate conjugate of minoxidil or active. So similarly, we have seen like codeine getting converted to active metabolite morphine, and it is lethal to the newborns. Through the breast milk, it gets transferred to the baby and it will be lethal to the baby. So here the same kind of exception is there. Glucuronate conjugate of morphine is active form. Then certain drugs already have functional groups and are directly conjugated. So we have discussed in the earlier slide, directly entering into phase 2. But the main pathway, general pathway is first phase 1, then phase 2. So differences between phase 1 and phase 2. Degradative reaction and then synthetic reaction. Introduction of functional group or uncovering of the functional group. Then conjugates phase 1 metabolite with glucuronic acid, sulfate, acetyl, methyl, all these kinds of groups. This is mainly microsomal, and this is microsomal, mitochondrial, and cytoplasmic. Then metabolites formed may be smaller, polar or non-polar, active or inactive. If it is active, again it has to go through phase 2. If it is non-polar and inactive, directly it can get excreted as such. And here metabolites formed are usually larger, polar, water soluble and inactive. So now we have understood the overview of phase 1 and phase 2 reactions. Now we'll get into the details of phase 1 and phase 2 reactions. These are all very, very important topics for your final exam. All the general pharmacology topics, any question you can get in the final exam. Okay. And especially this biotransformation, any area they can ask you any question. Phase 1 non-synthetic or functionalization reactions. So we have here oxidation, hydrolysis, reduction, cyclization, and decyclization. Again, oxidation is again divided into microsomal oxidation, non-microsomal oxidation. Microsomal oxidation is again subdivided to hydroxylation, S-oxidation, dealkylation, and some other are there, which we'll be discussing in further slides. And reduction is again subdivided to nitro reduction and keto reduction. So here we can see microsomal oxidation. Oxidation means what? Addition of oxygen or removal of hydrogen. That is a simple principle that you all well aware of. So here it is again subdivided into aromatic hydroxylation and aliphatic hydroxylation. So here aromatic ring molecule of the ring structure of the compound. Here hydroxyl molecule is attached. Aliphatic means straight chain is getting attached with hydroxyl molecule. Examples, you can just remember one or two examples: phenobarbital, phenytoin, propranolol, 3 P's. And here ibuprofen, simple molecule, or secobarbital, which belongs to the barbiturates group. Then oxidative dealkylation. So dealkylation again is subdivided into N dealkylation, O dealkylation, S dealkylation. N dealkylation means, so alkali group which is attached to the nitrogen atom is removed here. So this CH3 is removed and then CH3, CH4 is formed. One is getting eliminated. Example, mifebarbital, amitriptyline, etc. O dealkylation, similarly, alkali group attached to the O atom, oxygen atom is getting eliminated. Okay, it is getting divided and getting eliminated. Example, phenacetin, codeine, etc. S dealkylation, again, this alkali group which is attached to the S atom is getting eliminated. 6-methyl thiopurine. Then N-oxidation. It is again subdivided into, we can see this type of N-oxidation in primary amines, secondary amines, and tertiary amines. This is primary amine, one nitrogen molecule. So this N-oxidation, EH2 is getting like oxidized. Oxygen molecule is added. Here again, oxygen molecule is added. Then here, N R1, R2, R3 again, oxygen molecule, tertiary amine. This structure varies. Primary amine, secondary amine, tertiary amine, oxygen is getting introduced. Examples, aniline or chlorphenteramine, then acetaminophen, nicotine. Then S-oxidation, deamination, desulfuration, dechlorination. S-oxidation means again, oxygen is attached to the S atom. Cimetidine, chlorpromazine, deamination. This amine molecule which is attached to the which is present in the straight chain, that is liberated, cleavage, and then ammonia molecule is liberated. So deamination, amphetamine, amination, and amphetamine, amine. So you can remember in that way. Then desulfurization. So this is sulfur molecule is eliminated out of the structure. Parathion or thiopentol. Dechlorination, chlorine molecule is eliminated. Only Cl3 is there here, carbon tetrachloride. So then non-microsomal oxidation. So all these reactions come under, they take the help of microsomal enzymes. So now is oxidation with the involvement of non-microsomal enzymes. So these non-microsomal enzymes can be of origin like mitochondria, cytosol, or plasma. So mitochondrial example is oxidation here, epinephrine. Then cytosolic oxidation, alcohol, ethyl alcohol getting converted to acetaldehyde, then acetic acid. Then plasma oxidative processes, histamine getting converted to imidazoles acetic acid with the help of histaminase. Xanthine getting converted to uric acid with the help of xanthine oxidase. Then reductions, microsomal reductions. Again, nitro reductions, azo reductions, keto reductions we have. So nitro reduction, oxygen is eliminated, hydrogen is added, chlorampenica. Here also same hydrogen is added, prontosil or sulfasalazine azo reduction. Keto reduction, hydrogen molecule is added to the keto group, keto moiety. So examples are cortisone, methadone, metarapone, etc. This is all nitro reductions, azo reductions, and keto reductions. They belong to microsomal reductions. And non-microsomal reductions example is chloral hydrate. Then hydrolysis. So this is usually carried out by enzymes, that is carboxyesterases, esterases that hydrolyze the esters and amine containing compounds with addition of water. So what happens? Ester molecule, when it is combined with the water molecule, that is hydrolysis, that ester molecule will be broken into subsequent compounds. It will get divided, splitting with addition of water. So these enzymes are microsomal, non-microsomal, and myclofluoral in origin. So drugs like pethidine, procaine, acetylcholine, diacetylmorphine, atropine, neostigmine, phenytoin, they all are hydrolyzed by esterases. Digitalis glycosides are rendered inactive by hydrolysis. And methenamine mandylate, an urinary antiseptic, is hydrolyzed in the urinary tract at an acid pH to formaldehyde and ammonia. This is a specific target site of drug action. Then comes phase 1 reactions in detail. Apart from that, oxidation, reduction, and hydrolysis, we have like microsomal hydrolysis and non-microsomal hydrolysis. Examples are pethidine and lidocaine, and procaine getting converted into PABA, atropine to atropic acid, and penicillin Z to procainamide. The same non-microsomal hydrolysis. Then we have cyclization and decyclization. Cyclization means formation of ring structure from a straight chain compound. Decyclization means ring structure is open to form a straight chain compound. Example is proguanol there, and phenytoin and barbiturates here. So that is all about phase one reactions. So oxidation, reduction, hydrolysis, both like microsomal and non-microsomal, along with cyclization and decyclization. Okay, now we'll get into the phase two or synthetic reactions or conjugation reactions. So we have various types of conjugation reactions here: glucuronide conjugation, sulfate conjugation, glycine conjugation, glutathione conjugation, acetylation, methylation, etc. So conjugation reactions means what happens, the principle here is drug or its metabolite. Metabolite means which is released after the metabolism through phase 1 reaction. So that will combine with the endogenous substance like glucuronides, sulfate compound, methylated compounds, and amino acids. All these molecules will combine. They act like endogenous substances and they give rise to synthesis of conjugates which are inactive so that they can get eliminated out of the body through the process of excretion. So after such inactivation, large molecules are eliminated in the bile, whereas small molecules are excreted in the urine. This is the principle. Okay. So glucuronide conjugation, one by one, we'll go into the details. Parent drugs with phenolic, alcoholic, carboxylic, or amino or mercaptor groups, they get conjugated with, this is like drug molecule. So which have all these groups. It will get conjugated with UDPGA, uridine diphosphate glucuronide transferase enzyme will be involved here. So then it will result into drug glucuronide liberation along with UDP molecule. Okay, so examples are paracetamol and aspirin, diazepam, sulfonamide, chloramphenicol, etc. But the exception is morphine glucuronide is active. That's what we have discussed earlier. And natural endogenous substances like bilirubin, they also go through this process. Okay, so that's why we are using it for therapeutic purpose also. We'll see the advantages later. Then sulfate conjugation, which happens in cytosol. So this happens, glucuronide conjugation, it is microsomal conjugation. This is non-microsomal conjugation. So microsomal only glucuronide conjugation, and all the other phase 2 reactions come under non-microsomal conjugation. That is like sulfate conjugation, cytosol, it happens within. Then here you can see that this is like drug molecule containing hydroxyl group. So where it is attached to 3-phosphoadenosine 5-phosphosulfate molecule which acts as a sulfate donor. So with the help of sulfotransferase enzyme, this sulfate molecule, this sulfate donor releases sulfate molecule which gets combined with the drug molecule forming sulfate conjugate. Examples are aspirin, paracetamol, methyl dopa, corticosteroids, chloramphenicol, etc. Then glutathione conjugation also happens within the cytosol. So here the enzyme involved is glutathione transferase enzyme. Example is ithacrenic acid. N-acetyl conjugation also happens in cytosol. So if you don't remember this structure or NH2, you just write drug molecule. That is enough for you. You don't need to get into the chemistry. If you can remember, then that's well and good. If you don't remember, don't be panicked. So this drug molecule will be getting converted to the drug metabolite with the help of N-acetyl transferase and with the help of acetyl-CoA cofactor also. Examples of drug molecules which undergo this process are isoniazid, para-aminosalicylic acid, dapsone, sulfonamide, propanamide, histamine, etc. Then methyl conjugation, which also happens in cytosol. Here trans-methylase enzyme is involved. Cofactor or methyl donor is S-adenosine methionine. Then O-methylation, catecholamines like epinephrine, dopamine. N-methylation, amines like histamine. Amino acid conjugation. So till now we have discussed about the non-microsomal conjugation reactions which happen in cytosol, but amino acid conjugation, which it happens in mitochondria. Amine, here M you can see, mitochondria, M you can see. That way you can remember very easily. So here drug combines with glycine or glutamine. With the help of acetyl-CoA glycine transferase, amino acid conjugate is formed. Example, benzoic acid after combining with glycine, hippuric acid is formed. Another examples are aspirin, nicotinic acid, etc. So, summary of phase 2 reactions is glucuronidation with the help of glucuronyl transferase, sulfation with sulfotransferase, glutathione with glutathione S transferase, acetylation with acetyl transferase, amino acid conjugation with acyl transferase, methylation with methyl transferase. You just try to remember the principle. So drug, what happens to the drug? What sort of metabolite is formed? What is the enzyme involved? Whether it is microsomal or non-microsomal. If it is non-microsomal, whether it is cytosolic or mitochondrial. So that is more than enough for you. So phase 1 oxygenases, cytochrome P450 enzymes, oxidation, dealkylation, etc. FMOs, EH, so all phase 1 reactions. Phase 2 reactions, sulfotransferases, addition of sulfate, UDP, addition of glucuronic acid, GST, addition of glutathione, N-acetyl transferases, addition of acetyl group, methyl transferases, addition of methyl group. Other enzymes, alcohol dehydrogenase, aldehyde dehydrogenase, and NADPH29 oxidoreductase. They are all involved in the metabolism of alcohols and quinones. So, what is the peculiarity of biotransformation? Generally, phase 1, then phase 1 will be followed by phase 2. But there is a peculiarity. Some drugs follow phase 2 first, then phase 1. Isoniazid example. So N-acetyl conjugate is formed, that is phase 2 reaction. That conjugate is formed. Then it will go through phase 1 reaction of hydrolysis, giving rise to an active metabolite and gets excreted. Apart from that, some drugs can be metabolized by different enzymes simultaneously. Example, amitriptyline metabolized by CYP2D6, 2C9 and 2C90. And another exception is same CYP enzyme can metabolize different drugs simultaneously. That is, CYP3A4 can bind and metabolize diazepam and testosterone simultaneously. Then, what is the clinical significance of such biotransformation reactions? A drug may be metabolized and inactivated by more than one successive reaction. So, for example, progesterone is first reduced to pregnenolone, which is then conjugated. That is phase 1 first, then phase 2. Then chloramphenicol is also similarly reduced and then conjugated. Then, in practice, patients may differ in their response to a standard dose of a drug. This is largely due to variations in the rates of drug metabolism among individuals. This point we have already discussed. So, it is a very good point of clinical application when we go for pharmacotherapeutics. Enzyme induction. So, after going through the microsomal enzymes, non-microsomal enzymes, non-enzymatic metabolism of the xenobiotics, then phase 1 reactions in detail and phase 2 reactions in detail. Now we'll go to enzyme induction and enzyme inhibition. Enzyme induction. Drugs or repeated administration stimulate or induce the growth of smooth endoplasmic reticulum and thus increase the synthesis of microsomal enzyme protein. Okay, it is induction of the enzymes and it is reversible. So what happens when enzyme induction happens? It leads to enhanced microsomal enzyme activity. So because of the enzyme induction, then accelerated metabolism and decreased pharmacological response of not only the inducer itself, that is auto-induction, but also of the co-administered drug utilizing same enzymatic pathway. For example, if you give drug A and drug B, so this drug B is enzyme inducer. It will induce the enzyme that will help in the metabolism of drug B, so that the metabolism of drug B will be enhanced. And sometimes while enhancing the metabolism of drug B, drug A itself also will get metabolized, which is known as autoinduction. So because of the enhanced metabolism, there is decreased pharmacological response. So that is the clinical effect that we are going to see. And enzyme induction requires synthesis of proteins. So it takes long period of time, almost around 1 to 2 weeks, so to get the maximal effect. And the same amount of time, that is 1 to 2 weeks, to get nullified also. There, it doesn't mean that enzyme induction means enzyme induction will stay eternally in the body. No, it will get dissipated after 1 to 2 weeks. During enzyme induction, the hepatic blood flow is increased and there is increased synthesis of cytochrome P450 enzymes. That is another principle that we have to remember. And sites of enzyme induction, liver is the most prominent. Apart from that, we can see it in intestines, lungs, kidneys, placenta as well. So we have discussed this in the introduction itself. Then cytochrome P1A1 isozyme is induced in the lungs of cigarette smokers. This is the example that I have just given here, how enzyme induction happens in lungs. Examples are phenobarbital, phenytoin, carbamazepine, glucocorticoids, pioglitazone, efavirenz, rifampicin, isoniazid. Those are used in the management of tuberculosis. macrolides, omeprazole, cruciferous vegetables, chronic ethanol intake, smoking, and environmental pollutants. This is very, very important thing that you have to remember. So whenever you get a patient who is on chronic alcohol, uh, who is on chronic alcohol intake, so there is a possibility of enzyme induction in that patient. And if you get a patient who is a chronic smoker, there is a possibility of enzyme induction in that patient. And there is a, if you get a patient who is almost regularly chronically getting exposed to environmental pollutants, like a person who is working in industry or even a farmer, so then there is a possibility of enzyme induction. So if you, before you give the prescription to such sort of patients, you have to remember what sort of drugs you have to give and how much amount of dose you have to give. Okay, so a simple mnemonic I have given here to remember the names of the enzyme inducers. So like GPRS cell phone. So this is the mnemonic. So first letters you can see: G for griseofulvin, P for phenytoin, R for rifampicin, S for smoking, C for carbamazepine, P for phenobarbital. Then what is the clinical relevance of enzyme induction? So how it is going to be useful in our therapeutics? Decrease plasma levels and decrease therapeutic effect of the co-administered drug because of the constant induction and the metabolism pathway. So decrease drug effect if its metabolite is inactive, and increased drug effect if its metabolite is active. So we don't know whether the metabolite that is formed is active or inactive. So we have seen in morphine, it gets codeine, when it is getting converted to morphine, the active metabolite is released. So in such case, the pharmacological action will be enhanced, but when inactive molecule is formed, it is decreased. So we'll see one example here. Apart from this, OC pills. Suppose a lady, newly married couple. So one lady has come to you. So you have kept the patient on OC pills for contraceptive purpose. Not the patient. So that person is already suffering from tuberculosis or epilepsy, who is on either rifampicin or phenytoin for her disease. So if you want to choose or pick up the OC pills for her contraception, there is a possibility of enzyme induction because these two molecules, either of the molecule will act as enzyme inducer. So it will enhance the metabolism of OC pills, giving rise to contraception failure, and it will result in unwanted pregnancy. So when you prescribe two or three molecules, you need to know what are the molecules that we are permutation and combination what we are giving. So whether there is any possibility of enzyme induction or enzyme inhibition. So that we have to keep it a note in our mind. Then oral anticoagulant warfarin when it is combined with barbiturates. So this barbiturate is also is an enzyme inducer. So this will metabolize warfarin. So the patient needs higher doses of warfarin. But when you stop the barbiturates, then after withdrawing the barbiturates, the dose of warfarin needs to be reduced because the metabolism is not that much when you withdraw barbiturates, which are enzyme inducers. Then vitamin D3, when it is combined with phenytoin, which is an enzyme inducer, there is a possibility of osteomalacia because of the vitamin D3 deficiency because of the enzyme induction. Then barbiturates and alcohol enhance their own metabolism, autoenzyme induction, leading to development of pharmacokinetic tolerance. What is the meaning of pharmacokinetic tolerance? The dose has to be increased. At particular dose, you don't see the therapeutic effect that we usually get in other people. So pharmacokinetically, the patient is experiencing tolerance. So there is no efficacy that you are going to see in the patient. So the dose has to be increased, then only we can see the clinical efficacy. Then enzymes in alcoholics and smokers are in induced state. That's what we have discussed earlier. And thus the therapeutic dose of general anesthetics and sedative hypnotics is higher in case of alcoholics and smokers. Then enzyme reduction can lead to drug toxicity. Example, ethanol drinkers have more probabilities of hepatotoxicity when you give paracetamol. So with paracetamol overdose, if the patient is going on taking paracetamol for long period of time, especially the ethanol drinker, then there is a possibility of enzyme induction and then further increased production of N-acetyl para benzoquinone imine, which is a hepatotoxic metabolite that is released from the exaggerated metabolism of paracetamol, which is present in the higher doses. Okay, so there is a possibility. So you have to remember that point whenever you give paracetamol to the ethanol drinkers. Then enzyme induction can be used for therapeutic benefits. Example, in the treatment of neonatal jaundice. So neonates are deficient in glucuronidase enzyme. This is what we have discussed as a general principle. So here phenobarbital can be given to a pregnant mother 7 to 14 days prior to labor or to the infant soon after birth. So what is the advantage of this one? So this phenobarbital, which acts as an enzyme inducer, it induces the fetal hepatic glucuronil transferase enzyme. So because of the stimulation of this enzyme is going to catalyze the conjugation of bilirubin to glucuronic acid. So it fastens the conjugation process. So that is needed. So because of this, when this excess amount of bilirubin, which is present in case of neonatal jaundice patient, when this molecule goes and combines with glucuronic acid, forming glucuronic acid conjugate, that can easily get excreted along with the bilirubin molecule. So this is the pharmacotherapeutic application. Then Cushing syndrome, same is the case. Phenytoin may reduce the manifestations by enhancing degradation of adrenal steroids, which are produced in excess. Then chronic poisonings by faster metabolism of the accumulated poisonous substance. Same thing. And in liver disease also. Liver disease enzyme induction that we have already discussed, because the functioning capacity of the liver enzymes will be less. So there is a possibility of, we need to think about the permutations and combinations of which drug we are going to give. Okay. Then enzyme inhibition. One drug can competitively inhibit the metabolism of another. So that is like induction, this is like inhibition. If it utilizes the same enzyme or cofactors with resultant increase in the circulating levels of slowly metabolized drugs, so because of which prolongation or potentiation of its pharmacological effects. Enzyme inhibition is there, so metabolism is not there, so pharmacological action will be enhanced. However, such interactions are not that common because often different drugs are substrates for different cytochrome P450 isoenzymes. It is thus important to know the CYP isoenzymes that carry out the metabolism of a particular drug. So here, what are the various effects that we are going to see with enzyme inhibition? A drug may be the substrate as well as inhibitor of the same CYP isoenzyme. In case the drug inhibits its own metabolism, the oral bioavailability is likely to increase. So metabolism is decreased, bioavailability is increased for high first pass metabolism drugs, which we have discussed earlier. While systemic clearance is likely to decrease, prolonging the plasma half-life. Metabolism is decreased, bioavailability is increased, and pharmacological action is increased. And because of plasma half-life prolonging effect, and then along with that systemic clearance is also decreased. Example, on chronic dosing, the oral bioavailability of verapamil is nearly double and half-life is prolonged because it inhibits its own metabolism, auto inhibition. Then a drug may also inhibit one isoenzyme while being itself a substrate of another isoenzyme. Quinidine is metabolized mainly by CYP3A4, but it also inhibits CYP2D6. That is the example. Then metabolism of drugs with high hepatic extraction is dependent on liver blood flow limited metabolism. So example here is propranolol reduces rate of lidocaine metabolism by decreasing hepatic blood flow. So not only the enzyme factors, the hepatic blood flow also plays a prominent role in the metabolic reactions. And some other drugs whose rate of metabolism is limited by hepatic blood flow are morphine, propranolol, and verapamil and imipramine, etc. Then, what is the meaning of the suicide inhibitors? We have till now discussed about the enzyme inhibition, and this is something little bit away from suicide inhibition. What is the difference between a normal enzyme inhibition and suicide inhibition? That is reversible, that is irreversible. So substrates which irreversibly inhibit P450s via covalent interaction. So pharmacodynamic principles, nature of the drugs, we have discussed covalent bonding, which is going to result in irreversible manifestations, irreversible interactions. So via covalent interaction of a metabolically generated reactive intermediate that may react with the P450 apoprotein or heme moiety and cause the heme to fragment. It will be broken down and irreversibly modify the apoprotein. So we can't change it further once the inhibition happens. That is irreversible. So examples of drug molecules for this suicide inhibition or irreversible inhibition is antibiotic chloramphenicol, steroids like ethinyl estradiol, norethindrone, and spironolactone, salicylin, phencyclidine, ticlopidine, clopidogrel, ritonavir, etc., etc. Enzyme inhibition is usually reversible, but exceptionally irreversible. That's what we have seen in the suicide inhibition. And apart from that, we can see in secobarbital overdose also, because here secobarbital inactivates cytochrome P450, and thus impacts its own metabolism. Okay. Then, because enzyme inhibition occurs by direct effect on the enzyme induction requires synthesis of proteins, so it takes 1 to 2 weeks. Whereas here, direct inhibition of the enzyme, it is very simple, so it is rapid, occurs within hours compared to enzyme induction. The enzyme inhibition can be of hepatic microsomal mixed function oxidase or of enzymes having specific functions like xanthine oxidase, aldehyde dehydrogenase, etc. So we have enzyme inhibition with various sorts of enzymes like hepatic microsomal MFO inhibitors. Examples are cimetidine, sodium valproate, erythromycin, fluoroquinolones, except ofloxacin, and chloramphenicol, verapamil, diltiazem, etc. And aldehyde dehydrogenase inhibitors, examples are disulfiram, tolbutamide, metronidazole, etc. Xanthine oxidase inhibitor, allopurinol, acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, ecothiopate, and angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor, captopril, and enalapril. So we have so many molecules, allopurinol, examples of enzyme inhibitors. Amiodarone, cimetidine, omeprazole, antacids, macrolide antibiotics except azithromycin, ciprofloxacin, chloramphenicol, then isoniazid, quinidine, ketoconazole, itraconazole, fluconazole, antifungal drugs, disulfiram, metronidazole, then verapamil, diltiazem, MAVA inhibitors, and the common thing that is like grapefruit juice also acts as enzyme inhibitor, then fluoxetine, paroxetine, ritonavir, and propoxyphene. So if you can't remember all these names, just a mnemonic I'm going to give again. Vitamin K cannot cause enzyme inhibition. So here you can see V for valproate, K for ketoconazole, C for cimetidine, C for ciprofloxacin, E for erythromycin, I for INH. So what is the clinical relevance of this enzyme inhibition? So it can produce adverse consequences or therapeutic utility or both combined together. So adverse consequences, let us see. So when you combine theophylline molecule along with the enzyme inhibitor, that is chloramphenicol or erythromycin, so this erythromycin or chloramphenicol molecule is going to inhibit the metabolism of theophylline. So more amount of drug, that is like bioavailability of theophylline and pharmacological activity of theophylline is enhanced, giving rise to nausea, vomiting, and tremors. This is adverse consequences because of enzyme inhibition. Similarly, cimetidine enzyme inhibitor combining with dicumarol enhanced bleeding tendency will result. MAVO inhibitors combined with morphine, severe respiratory depression will be the result. Dicumarol or chloramphenicol, an enzyme inhibitor combined with phenytoin, giving rise to ataxia and drowsiness, and chloramphenicol or ketoconazole, enzyme inhibitor combined with terfenadine, precipitation of cardiac arrhythmias. So, the adverse effects of all these molecules will be predominantly seen with enzyme induction. Then beneficial consequences. For example, if we give levodopa combined along with carbidopa, it is like decarboxylase inhibitor. So carbidopa prevents peripheral decarboxylation of this levodopa in the peripheral tissues so that levodopa molecule will not get metabolized. So there is no reduction of bioavailability. So more amount of levodopa can cross the blood-brain barrier and available for central nervous system action. This is beneficial consequence, which is used in the management of Parkinson's disease. Then D-tubocurarine, when it is combined with neostigmine, so it is acetylcholinesterase reversible inhibitor. So there is a possibility of reversal of skeletal muscle paralysis. So this results in flaccid muscles, skeletal muscle paralysis. So because of this molecule combination, reversal of skeletal muscle paralysis results. Acetazolamide inhibits carbonic anhydrase enzyme and this is used in the management of glaucoma. Enalapril inhibits ACE enzyme, that is angiotensin convertase enzyme, which is used in the management of hypertension. NSAIDs inhibits cyclooxygenase enzyme and are used to relieve pain and inflammation. Then both beneficial plus adverse effects. Let us see the example. So a patient has come to you, chronic alcoholic person. So you want to uh, de-addict him. So you are going to administer disulfiram molecule, which is aldehyde dehydrogenase inhibitor. So if you after administration of this molecule to the patient without the patient's knowledge, so we are not going to explain that what this molecule is going to do within the body of the patient. Then if a patient takes alcohol, there will be further conversion of alcohol to acetaldehyde and then to acetic acid, which is prevented because of this disulfiram molecule. So this is like aldehyde dehydrogenase inhibitor. So alcohol is going to get normally converted to acetaldehyde because of the help of alcohol dehydrogenase. Then acetaldehyde getting converted to acetic acid because of the aldehyde dehydrogenase inhibitor. So this reaction, conversion from acetaldehyde to acetic acid, we are going to inhibit. So this is inhibited. So more amount of like acetaldehyde is formed, giving rise to the manifestations like nausea, vomiting, headache. So because of which the patient feels that he feels aversion towards the alcohol, he will not take any more alcohol. Because if I take alcohol, I'm going to get these manifestations. This is both beneficial as well as adverse, means it is giving rise to adverse effects also. So this is all about enzyme induction and inhibition. And finally, we are going to discuss very few points about the factors affecting drug metabolism. So various factors like age, sex, species, race, genetic variation, nutrition and diet, disease, drug-to-drug interactions, etc. Age. Neonates, we have discussed this point already. Low microsomal enzyme and glucuronide transferase enzyme activity. And these attain full functional capacity several weeks after birth, maybe like 1 to 3 months, something like that. So when you give chloramphenicol in neonates, because of the reduced metabolism or reduced functioning capacity of the metabolizing enzymes, there is a lethal reaction that is going to result, that is chloramphenicol gray baby syndrome with cyanosis, which is very lethal to the baby. Then similarly, in case of other extreme age group, that is elderly people which are more than 60 years of age, they have reduced hepatic blood flow. So which we have discussed the importance of hepatic blood flow in connection to the metabolizing enzymes. So because of this reduced hepatic blood flow, there is reduced metabolism and increased toxicity. And it is most commonly seen with administration of propranolol in elderly patients. Then another factor, that is sex. It is most commonly important in animals but not in humans, but we need to know about it. Hexoparbital administration, if you give to the male rats, so there is higher metabolism. So there is less sedation in male rats when compared to the female rats. Species. Rabbits metabolize atropine faster than humans as they have high atropinesterase activity in the liver and plasma. Then race. Chinese have a high alcohol dehydrogenase and low aldehyde dehydrogenase activity. So they exhibit higher plasma concentration of aldehyde, resulting in headache and palpitation after alcohol consumption. So I don't want to comment on this because Chinese will experience these kind of things, and most probably boys must be knowing about it. Then genetic variation. Succinylcholine administration in patients having atypical pseudocholinesterase leads to prolonged apnea due to retarded metabolism. So succinylcholine is not going to get metabolized because of the atypical pseudocholinesterase enzyme present in particular group of patients. So it results in prolonged apnea, which is very fatal. Then nutrition and diet. Diet rich in protein and low in carbohydrates, enhanced metabolism. Because rich protein diet supplies glycine and cysteine, which are essential to form conjugated metabolites of the drug. Whereas diet poor in protein and rich in carbohydrates slows down the metabolism. For example, starvation leads to enzyme inhibition. So suppose if a patient who is on starvation, whether it is malnourishment or like religious or spiritual like fasting kind of thing, you need to educate the patient whenever you are going to administer the certain heavy molecules to the therapeutic purpose. Then disease, viral hepatitis, alcoholic hepatitis, liver cirrhosis, hepatocellular carcinoma, heavy metal poisoning, they all will result in reduced activity of hepatic microsomal enzymes. So especially with molecules like pethidine and morphine. And you are well aware of, you must be well aware of that hypothyroidism, reduced metabolism, hyperthyroidism, all metabolic reactions will be enhanced. And CHF, that is congestive heart failure, and shock, there is reduction in hepatic blood flow. Again, this point. So marked reduction in metabolic degradation of particular molecules like lignocaine. Then finally, drug-to-drug interactions. Drugs affect the rate of metabolism of other drugs due to enzyme induction or enzyme inhibition. So whenever you are going for polypharmacy for the patient suffering from various comorbid diseases, so you need to keep all these points very well for therapeutic application. Otherwise, the patient may land upon in dreadful complications. So this is about the clinical relevance of drug metabolism and everything. So thank you for patient hearing. So here ends the topic biotransformation. Hope it is clear to you. I tried my level best to make it very simplified so that you will be able to understand it very easily. So don't become panic because of the biotransformation reactions. You can simplify it and write like a drug molecule plus which endogenous compound is going to get combined with that and which metabolite is going to get result. Okay. So if you have any doubts, then you can clarify with me on my personal window. Thank you. Thank you very much for patient listening. So